Hello, welcome back to my studio. Today I've got some quick, short and sharp tips on how to varnish your oil paintings. Now I get many questions about whether artists should varnish their paintings, and the answer is simple. If you like the painting, or if you're going to sell the painting, if you're going to display the painting, or if you want to look after the painting, please varnish the painting. So how do I go about varnishing oil paintings? My favorite method is to use retouch varnish. Now retouch varnish is very thin varnish. In fact, it allows the oil paint to actually keep on breathing so that the remaining parts that lower down in the paint that may not have fully dried can still continue to dry. Now you get other types of varnish, of course, and things like Damar varnish are a very thick type of varnish, also tend to be very glossy. I stay away from all of those things. I don't want thick, gooey varnishes, and I hate an overly glossy painting. So what do I use? I simply use retouch varnish. This is made by De La Rowney. It's not expensive, a bottle of 75 mils like this. Quite inexpensive but very effective. And I'll put one coat on my painting. I'll show you how I do that in a moment. Now, following on whether you should varnish or not, the next question is, when do I know my painting is dry and I can varnish it? This is, of course, one of those open-ended type of questions. It all depends. For me, in a relatively dry climate here in South Africa, anything from a week up to 2 weeks for the drying process, and then it's fine. I can put on retouch varnish. If I've used thick paint, or particularly thick impasto, and especially thick painting knife applications of paint, then 2 weeks minimum. And how I check, I just do the old-fashioned way of a little touch with the finger on any areas where the paint is a bit thick, and if there's any mark or any tackiness or any give in the painting, then of course I won't varnish it. For thin applications of paint, that is normally dry within a week. There's no problem with that. And I never use mediums to slow the drying process or speed it up. I use the paint straight out the tube and let it dry naturally in a room that has good airflow through it. I don't put it in direct sunlight. I don't believe that actually helps. And just a bit of airflow in your room and a week, and you should be fine in most cases. If you do apply the varnish, be very careful as you do it. Keep a good lookout. If you see any milkiness developing over your colors, you know you've hit wet paint, and stop immediately, and you can dab that off with a tissue or a lint-free rag, and you should be fine. Just leave it alone, let it dry for another week, and then have another go. And you should be good as well. Why varnish? Well, as I said in the beginning, to look after your painting. There is nothing worse than looking at your painting after a few months on the wall and you see fly specks on it or any other sort of grubbiness and dust or anything like that. You can wipe that off normally just with a slightly damp cloth, and your painting is fine. So always varnish, and even your acrylic paintings as well. That's another subject, but varnish those too. If you don't like the brush-on retouch varnish, you can try some of the spray versions. I've demonstrated these before on my channel. This is in fact a water-based varnish, and you can use that for oils and acrylics. This is another one by Acrylic, a quick dry varnish for oil paintings, very much like a retouch varnish. And you can look for retouch varnish sprays as well if you like using spray. Personally, I prefer the brush-on varnish. I think it is more rewarding and satisfying to me as well when I apply it.
Right, let's have a look and see how I go about the varnishing. Here I'm pouring on some retouch varnish onto a dry oil painting and using a brush that is clean, just spreading the varnish around. And if you just look at the painting at the right angle, you can see some light reflecting off it, and you can see the dull spots and where you need to brush over with some varnish. Now, another great advantage of varnishing your painting, of course, is that it brings out the best in the colors, especially the darks. Dark colors dry a little lighter, and the varnish makes those darks look really transparent and deep. And that's all there really is to it. If you need a little more, just put on carefully. You can dip the brush into the jar as well if your brush is small enough. But if you just pour on a careful amount, you should be able to spread that over without any trouble at all. And one even coat throughout, then place the painting in a cool, dry place, as they say, out of direct sunlight, and where there's any dust or anything like that blowing around, avoid that. Obviously, varnishing in windy conditions and you've got lots of dust blowing around, that's not good news at all. So avoid varnishing on days like that. I make sure there's good air ventilation, as the varnish does have a bit of an unpleasant odor, but it's not too bad. Just make sure there's a good through draft in the room, just enough to get rid of the smell and to speed up the varnishing. And then put the paintings out of the way, and they should be fine the next day. I like to let the paintings dry probably for several days so that there is no tackiness to the varnish at all. You can see how the darks come out really nicely with that coat of varnish. That's all there is to it. Once it's dry, you can frame the painting and you're good to go.
So that's it for varnishing. Just keep it simple, get some retouch varnish and apply that when your painting is dry and you'll be fine. Well, make sure to subscribe to my channel to get future painting tips and painting demonstrations coming up next week as well. And until next time, cheers for now.